Hello, thank you for joining me today on the Sungrand channel. I sure am glad to see you. I'm Jerrel from Sungrand. Today we'll be working on some artwork, a fun idea I had for a sort of a alien moonshine sign done in a 50s style, or maybe a little bit different as well. And for starters, we'll be using artwork that I did not create myself. We'll be using artwork that you can get yourself from various websites that offer royalty-free stock drawings. And the reason for that is it might be fun for you to sort of join in along if you want to try and composite these images yourself. But also, I'm actually very busy in terms of game development and also writing our novel, Heavy Shadow, which you can read new chapters of each week. So I am writing the novel all throughout the week. Also, I'm developing multiple games simultaneously, so I don't exactly have the time to sit down and do all these line artwork myself, but I will be going through some painting and adding some detail and color to the image itself. So to get things started, why don't you have a sip of your Earl Grey tea, and we'll get these images composited. Fantastic. There we go. Now, to get things started, we'll go ahead and make visible a few images that I have here. First off will be a UFO image and also a mason jar. As you can see, we will have to do some destructive processes to get rid of some of the lines, as we want the jar to appear above the UFO. So our lines will have to line up. Another bit of compositing we will have to do is with the foreground trees that we have here, and also some mountains we have in the back. As you can tell, the color and thickness and intensity of the lines do not match between these different pieces. Again, all of this artwork, I did not create this myself. I sourced them from royalty-free stock websites, and I style match them with a sort of line art that hopefully will blend in well enough. But again, the intensity does not really work all that well. I'll be using my drawing tablet today, but while we composite these images, I will go ahead and switch to my keyboard. Let's move this off to the side, just for now. Now, bring our keyboard back into place. All right, now, for starters, I would like to match this style of intensity in terms of the darkness and the levels of the lines. So, for this layer first, I'll press Ctrl L as my shortcut. You can see we can control the intensity of the lines. This reduces the amount of darkness that the dark pixels have, so your darks will be lighter. If you were to do this, your lights would be darker, and you can see that a rectangle becomes visible at that point. So this shifts the overall intensity of the brightness or darkness. So what we will want to do to style match these lines and the intensity here is to reduce the intensity of the darks. Okay, so our dark pixels, we're going to bring them up just a bit. That appears to be pretty close, and you can see the color. That's quite a bit brown. And this is just a bit on the, well, desaturated side. I'm going to press Ctrl B here. And we'll bring up a bit of our color balance wheel. Just give that a bit of reds and a little bit of yellows. You can see it's too much yellow now. Let's go ahead and give that some magentas. Bring the yellows in a little bit. Bring the reds out just a bit. It seems to match. Let's say 40, 11, and 18. Quite close, isn't it? Let's go ahead and do the same thing. -11, -18. And they appear somewhat close. For the backs, we will also reduce our dark pixel intensity. All right. Actually, I did that in a bit of a backward order, but at the end of the day, it ain't a piano. It doesn't need to be precise. It just needs to look good to the eye. Let's go ahead and bring up the intensity of the saturation on that. I'll press Ctrl U to get to my saturation shortcut. And now I'm just going to eyeball it. Yes? That does appear to be quite a bit closer to that top image. Our background. Let's go ahead and reduce our dark pixels just there. That's fantastic. And now let's hide those for now. Let's look back to our jar. Make sure that our jar matches that. might want to reduce the intensity of the dark pixels on the jar. No. Maybe not too much here. Maybe just a little bit. Yes? Right, just a little bit. We'll control you and bring up our intensity, our saturation, just a little bit. As you can see, I've made a backup here of my jar and my UFO, just in case I perform a destructive process that I'm not happy with. I can go ahead and roll that back, and I can bring back my backups here, and I can start from the very beginning of those backups. I know from the get-go that the jar is already too big, but also the UFO is too big as well. So we'll do quickly is we will want to very quickly mark up where we want our elements to be in terms of size. Go ahead and flip this horizontally. What we've done is we've made a copy of the background. Let's see here. There we go. Now we've got a bit of detail in the background. Now, as we mentioned before, in terms of a Western audience, we tend to read things from left to right. And in terms of comics, we read things from top to bottom. So, if you were to have a right element higher than the left, it looks a little bit weird to a Western audience who is reading that. They tend to read that that's moving upwards. I don't necessarily want any sort of movement, but as you can tell, it's quite symmetrical here. Let's go ahead and flip that back around, see how that mountain looks. I actually think it looks a bit better. There's less symmetry. It gives the scene a bit more interesting dynamic to it. But we might not have a choice when it comes to the foreground. So let's duplicate our foreground. This time we'll mirror it horizontally because I do want this sort of shape here, but I'm actually going to lower it a bit. And we're going to remove some of that symmetry there by bringing it down. We'll be modifying some of these foreground elements, but we want the jar to occupy the center space here. So let's go ahead and move that down just a little bit more. But we also have to keep in mind that we would like to keep some text on the scene as well. All right, let's go ahead and move this tree somewhere around here. I'll be removing some of these elements again to remove some of the symmetry and give a bit more space for the other graphical elements in the scene. Let's see. Now, first, let's go ahead and change the size of our UFO. We want the UFO to be the prominent element in the scene, but we still need to have room for the other graphical elements. Let's see, I am imagining our text living somewhere around up here. We would also like to have some text down around the bottom, so we will have to erase some of these elements down here. I think that might be happy just there. For our jar, let's go ahead and begin shrinking our mason jar, just like this. We want the jar to be ever visible. Let's go ahead and give it a little bit of dynamic. How does that look? How about this? It gives it a bit more interesting dynamic, doesn't it? A little bit of character as it goes sideways. Excuse me. I'm just going to enjoy some of my Earl Grey tea. Ah, fantastic. Now, we want it to be clear that this is a mason jar, so we'll have to remove some of these distracting lines from the background, not the background, but from the UFO tractor beam. Okay, now, just to roughly give us a bit of perspective on where we want our text to live, let's go like this. I have a font in mind. Let's try this. All right, let's go. Alien. Bit of space for our text. Moonshine. How's that? Let's shrink our text a little bit more. Now I like to look towards the corner here. This is our navigator. So while I'm zoomed in, I may not have full perspective of the screen, but looking here, I can see the presence of my various graphical elements, and I can see that the alien moonshine, if I make that any smaller, it's going to get lost in the overall composition. I don't necessarily want to make that much smaller, but perhaps I will reduce the spacing. So this here, you can reduce the spacing of your text. You don't want it to feel cramped, but I would like it to fit in just a little bit better. How about that? That might be a little bit cramped. Let's give them a little bit more breathing room. Let's see. Doesn't look too bad. Let's go ahead and move our UFO just a little bit more. Okay. This space here is looking quite nice. And bringing up a giant jar of moonshine. Fantastic. Now, this area is looking just a little bit busy here. And let's name this right. All left. Let's bring him in, bring him out just a bit. With the composition, what I'm aiming for is your eyes start with the text. You see the spaceship, and these mountains pull your focus off to the side. So I would like your focus to be pulled back in to the center, and hopefully they bring you back in to the jar just here. Same should be said for the other side. Your visual focus starts here as you look at it. You see the big center of focus here, which is the visual graphic, which is most important. It is an alien. Your viewer's focus is sort of pulled away. And again, I need those shape of the trees to steer your vision back in. So right now they're pointing around here, which isn't great. Our jar might be just a little bit too high. So if we bring our jar just a little bit lower now, let's see. I think visually that reads a bit better. How about this? I don't like these intersecting lines that have very narrow tangents. They look quite a bit messy, so I might bring that down just a little bit more, and I think that fits quite nicely. So what's left now is to just fine-tune these edges here. Just like that. Let's bring our viewer's focus back in. Now again, with these small tangents, you don't want anything unpleasant like these orphaned lines of detail here. It's a little bit confusing to the eye, so I'm going to nudge that until that's quite neat there. On the right, let's go ahead and have a look at our redirection of focus here. Okay, that looks just fine. I'm going to do a little bit of coloring work now as we get this started. As it stands, I quite like this etched brown look. So I could have two versions of this. I could have a colored and this etched version. Let's go ahead and save this as another part. Let's put a B after that. Fantastic. We're going to put our keyboard and our mouse away for now. We'll switch to our Wacom Intuos 4 drawing tablet. Wonderful. As you might be able to see, the nib that I have at the end of this stylus is one of the softer ones. It tends to wear out much faster than the plastic ones, but it does slow the movement of the pen down a bit, and it feels a bit more like painting or writing on to paper. I have preset my layers here. I have my color content, and I have my base, shadow, and light. For the shadow and light, it's often nice to have that set to color burn or linear burn, depending on what you would like to do with your colors. You can have these on overlay or soft light or hard light. Maybe I'll leave that on soft light for now, and we'll come back to that later and fine tune it. First, let's start with our base. We don't want to go too crazy here in terms of detail. Again, we are game developers, and we don't really want to spend all of our development time creating a painting that someone might walk past and look at for maybe about 10 seconds or so. For our base, again, just to point out, all of our detailed lines are set to multiply. They are higher up in the hierarchy, which means they will be above. So, for starters, let's just pick a nice, delicate gray. I'm going to go with a sort of a soft blue. Yes, that looks quite nice. This will be the base color for our mountains, and we would like to imagine that this is at nighttime. Let's go ahead and just start coloring these in just a little bit at a time. With the tablet here, you can see that I have the opacity and the flow set to be controlled by the pressure of the tablet itself. I do want to color in the sky, so I'm actually going to overflow that just a bit. Let's make that a bit bigger. Doesn't matter if I overflow on the sides a little bit. Again, I have that in a mask layer, or a layer mask. Okay. Let's go ahead and color that in. And look, regardless of what society tells you, you matter. And if you want to color outside the lines, you go right on ahead. If that makes you happy, color outside the lines. You be you. Wonderful. Okay, I get to color this in nice and lightly. Again, I want to go over the top because I'm going to have my sky in there as well. Let's just quickly go over that just like this. I'm not 100% sure what color we want our sky to be, but we'll be coming back to this at another time. I'm not going to have a saved or stored palette, which means I won't be able to return and use colors that I had previously used. And I'm doing that on purpose, as I would like to keep an organic feel to this. So if I have to keep switching colors, it gives more life, more variety, and more dynamic to the image itself, as I have to keep picking similar colors but not the exact same color. And I think that adds quite a bit of character to the overall image at the end of the day. Let's see here. Wonderful. Okay. Just going to etch that in very briefly. We'll be filling those colors in. Again, this is something that can take quite a bit of time, but as long as you're enjoying the process, really that's what matters at the end of the day. This doesn't look quite nice, does it? It's the exact same color as the mountains. It really blends in a bit too much. So let's go ahead and give that more saturation and a lighter color now. I'm going to go with blue, as it has more dynamic to the color, and it will actually allow it to pop a bit more. We'll be adding quite a few highlights to this flying craft as well, so that will help it stand out. And I'm going to color outside the lines a little bit. Okay. So we will have a blue sky, the night sky, color in after the fact. Okay? This is just giving us a rough outline on how our end color will look. Okay? This is just a nice base color. Let's zoom out, make sure we're happy with what we have so far. That seems to stand out a fair bit more. Lovely. Make sure we've colored in. Now, we can go ahead and have a look at what our terrain looks like here. Let's pick a nice soft brown for our terrain. We don't want the ground to have too much focus, so we'll keep it a little bit less desaturated. How about that? Something nice, sandy, and earthy for our earth and terrain. Let's go ahead and fill this in a bit. Again, we will have a sky. This won't be sky here, this will be more terrain. We'll have colors we can ease into just there. Nice and easy. Don't want anything too intense. We want a style match, probably closer to the 50s or 60s, though we're not necessarily style matching the branding and a very intense style of marketing from the 50s right now. This is a little bit more of just a general old style artwork. Here we go. Not too bad. As you can see, as I push harder on the stylus and I apply more pressure, you can see that more of the color flows out. And I do want that nice light brown background as my base color, as that adds a bit of character to it. Okay? On the Intuos 4 here, which is one of my favorite tablets to use to draw on, it's a fair bit of an older model now, but it does have the control wheel. I'll bring it up here and show you. Control wheel makes it easy to adjust certain things, such as your brush size. You can also control things such as the rotation of your canvas, which can help you uh, draw and color things a bit more comfortably. All right, now let's fill this in here. So you can see for the lighter areas, I do want to leave some highlights in there. Again, I'm going to have to add in color behind it in a little while as well, so I'm not concerned about coloring outside the lines just at the moment. Okay, we'll color a bit darker behind the tree there. Yes, that's not so bad, is it? These are happy little trees. Let's go ahead and give them a nice little background there. Okay, and this seems to be a small bit of foreground here. We'll use some other colors to help it pop and stand out. So for now, let's go ahead and just give it some nice bit of texture. We'll use an uneven amount of pressure just to give the ground some pressure and texture. There we go. Shrink that down so I can push harder and have more color. All right, make that bigger just to give it some texture. That's not too bad. Again, we'll do the same for this side here. We'll go quite dark behind the trees here. Right. Again, we will alternate between a light stroke and a dark stroke so we can give the ground a fair amount of detail and dynamic. How about that? Now, ideally, we would like the edges of our foreground, our most foreground here. Let's see. On that side, I didn't leave much, so I will do this instead. Shrink my brush down, and I'll actually apply a bit of pressure just here along the background, like that, to darken it. What is directly behind it can be a bit darker. In terms of doing artwork with the tablet, doing digital painting, I actually prefer Clip Studio. I prefer the selection of brushes and the tools and simulation of the tablet for brush strokes. But we're working in Photoshop today, so we can be happy with the tools that we have at hand and be grateful that they do work so well. Wonderful. Doesn't look too bad. Now, for our eraser tool, let's go ahead and get a nice brush here. Let's see if we can just very, very easily and very finely give that just a very bright, very light amount of highlighting there. We want that to stand out just a little bit. Okay. That's not too bad. I think I'll lighten this area just a little bit more. How about that? Yeah, that's not too bad. Make that larger. Lighten that up. Not too bad. That looks okay. Wonderful. Now, we've got our base colors started. We'll have to do quite a fair bit more work to fill in the background and the night sky. For now, we'll save our progress. There we go. Okay, in our next episode, I think we might start coloring in our happy little trees. Thanks very much for joining me today. I sure am glad to see you today, and I hope that you'll check in next time. If you enjoyed this video, it sure would be great if you liked that subscribe button. And if you wouldn't mind, it would be great if you could share this video with people you think might enjoy it as well. I'm Jerrel. This has been the Sun Grand channel, and thank you very much. We hope to see you in the next episode.